Well, on to the West. Welcome, everybody, to Uncut Nonsense, the show where you'll probably see the least amount of images in a 25-minute video as you possibly can. I am your host, Doc Klugman, back at it again for you guys, and we're going to be wrapping up the NFC this time with the NFC West for our predictions into the upcoming season. Right now, the season about maybe a day or two away, and we're all preparing to see how things shape up. As we head to the NFC West, we have our teams: the Los Angeles Rams, the Arizona Cardinals, the Seattle Seahawks, and of course the San Francisco 49ers. This is a division that seems to be flipping around a little bit. You have some teams that you feel are kind of bit wild cards as you don't know what exactly to think of them. You have teams such as the 49ers last year who were just absolutely crippled with injuries when they were supposed to be a heavy favorite. Then you have teams like the Rams that ended up coming out and making a big splash. You have the Seahawks, of course, that are constantly switching things around, especially after the loss of Russell Wilson several years back. They're still trying to figure out stuff as they have a new quarterback again. And then you have the Arizona Cardinals, a team that's just honestly so much fun to watch. But we'll start off with the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams last year finished actually in first place. They were your divisional winner at 10-7. They tied up with the same record as the um as the NFC South team. They had a home record of 5-4 as well as the way of 5-3. So overall, they end up getting the job done. And a division like the West last year that had a lot of good contenders, that had a lot of good teams, that played a lot of good games, this was the best that they were able to do, and it still worked out. They ended up putting together a really good team. They obviously won a playoff game where they faced off against the Minnesota Vikings that came in with 14 wins. Kind of a joke that they ended up being a wild card. However, because they did not win the division, they were the first in line to end up doing that. And frankly, they ended up doing very well. They ended up going after Sam Darnold. They sacked him a whole bunch of times. The game was kind of lopsided when you realize just how horrible that defense was for Minnesota. And I think with that, the rest was history. The Rams ended up making sort of a name for themselves, and eventually they just ran out of steam as the next opponent they were going to play would be the Philadelphia Eagles. And we all know how that ended up going. Last year, though, offensive wise, they were a little bit below average, except for the passing side of things. On the offensive side, points per game, they were at 20th. The offensive rush was not much better. In fact, it was a little bit worse at 24th. But the passing at 10th was good. The passing attack is what really helped the Rams, especially later on in the season. If you have a good offensive passing attack, you automatically have a chance to sort of rack up some good amount of points, large yardage situations at a time. And that's exactly what you look forward to when you have these scenarios. Stafford, again, very, very good. And it turns out that this ended up being a good sort of trade over time that ended up having them switch quarterbacks with the Detroit Lions. And the Rams still trying to, I guess you can say, sort of thrive with it now. Defensive wise, 17th. Defensive rushing, the points per game was 17th, excuse me. Defensive rush was 22nd, and the pass was 20th. So again, although the defense did have a very, very good performance for the Rams in the playoff game, it's something that is going to need to be more improved on. Obviously, the loss for the cup for the Rams makes a big difference compared to how much of a big threat that he was in previous years. And I think sort of the rebuild of what you're trying to do is really going to be the critical part for the Rams this upcoming season. Taking a look at their schedule, they have obviously the divisional opponents, but they will be playing some tough teams that are going to be obviously your first place teams. You have Houston at home, you have Detroit at home, you have Tampa Bay at home. Obviously, you'll face off against Indy and New Orleans. Those are going to be your easier games. But again, in a division like the NFC West, a lot can happen. We've seen these last couple of years where things have flip flopped back and forth. Some teams getting hot at the right time, and I think that's what the Rams really did Remember, they kind of started off in the middle of the road. At the beginning, it was Arizona and Seattle that kind of stuck their head out a little bit more. San Francisco and LA tripped around a little bit, but once the second half of the season started, that's when the Rams got hot. And that right there matters when you're playing these sort of games. And the fact that the Rams were able to get hot at the right time, I think that was a big key to the success that they ended up having. Looking ahead on the road, you have to play Philadelphia, you got to play Jacksonville and Tennessee, which should be easier. Carolina, Atlanta, but the big boy right there, Baltimore as well. So I think the road is a little bit easier for the Rams. However, of course, dealing with these other tough teams, it's going to be hit or miss on whether or not the Rams are that team if they're hot or if they're not. I honestly think that they can win 10 or 11 games this year. I think they can make that opportunity to be back in the playoffs as a divisional winner. Obviously, you do have a lot of these other divisions that are stacked with very good teams. You know, the NFC North is pretty good. Yeah, the NFC East, that's not too bad. We talked about the NFC South, and although I think the Bucks will win, I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta put together some nice wins and can squeak in as a potential wild card team. The West is kind of the same way. You don't know necessarily what these teams are going to do there because we've seen so many different variations of them. Injuries have played a factor in some of these teams, performance levels, whether or not it's a bad loss or a good win. It's all been varied with that. We've seen it from all four of these teams. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Overall, I do predict that the Rams are going to do a lot better. I don't have them being a juggernaut in the NFC again this year. I think they can definitely put together some impressive wins. But overall, there's nothing that stands out to me enough to be able to say that this is a team that's going to run away with this division. That's good because it keeps the division nice and tight. However, it's also bad in the case if you are the Rams itself, as well as some of these other teams that we're going to go over. Coming up next, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals are just fun to watch. Cardinals are just a fun team to watch. They can have their backs up against the wall and be so terrible. And you would think like, oh, they're going to get smoked by this team. And then they put up a good fight, or even more so, they sometimes win. And those are the games where you actually look back on and you're like, wow, that was really impressive. How the heck did they pull that win out? How the heck did they do that? How did, how would Murray be able to pull something together with that? Because, the quarterback with him in the situation with everything up and down on him. They finished third last year, an 8-9 record. It was an average, and I think the record tells it all in this case. It was an average. Everything was pretty much average. Home they did good at 6-3. Away is where they struggled. They struggled on the road. It was a 2-6 record. Really, really nothing to be proud about when it comes to that. That was the only thing I would say throughout this team that really was not average. Turnover differential -3. They had a few more giveaways than they did takeaways. However, again, average, right around the thing. I mean, of course, you always want the positive, turnover differential. But even you think of it this way, a turnover differential at 0 is average. You're not giving the ball away too much. However, you're also not taking it away too much. So an average thing is what you want, and that's exactly what the Cardinals is. If you haven't noticed already, with this segment, average is going to be the key word for the Arizona Cardinals. Defensive wise, same thing, magic A word, average. Defensive points per game, right dead in the middle. Rush a little bit less in the 20th, but they did make up for it with the pass at 14th. Again, right in the middle of the road. And for the offense, sort of the same thing. Offensive points per game were 12th. The passing attack was at 18th, which is a little bit below than what you kind of want, especially for a team that was around 8 and 9. It is kind of up to par. The rush, though, was quite impressive. It was in the top 10, and I think that's really where they shined when it came to having that good rushing attack. There were many games that they were able to really run the ball effectively against their opponent, and I think that's something that you need to build on. I know it's not a big popular thing anymore that you see with these teams about just ground and pound and everything like that. I remember the big slogan was keep pounding out in Carolina for the Panthers. They were one of the big ones that promoted the actual running game. That was also back when they had McCaffrey, who was able to run the ball like a beast. However, to have that good rushing attack be consistent like that for a team that is average, other than that, I think that's really critical, and I think that needs to be an identity that the Cardinals need to entertain. Passing the ball was not going to be enough with this team, and obviously they need to get a little bit fancy when it comes to their wins. Their schedule was not that daunting and they do get a break being that they are a third place team. They'll play other third place opponents. However, they need to have something that separates themselves. And if it's not something that's in the ordinary, such as the pass game, I think that's okay. And I think it's something that could still be okay for this team. The Cardinals, in my opinion, are dark horse. And I think if they can play that long enough and fly under the radar, I think they have a chance to still be able to get something together where they might finish above 500, unlike last year, when they slipped just below it. Looking at their schedule, they got Green Bay. You know that's going to be a tough game. But the rest of the home schedule is not bad. You play Jacksonville, Tennessee, Carolina, Atlanta. These are winnable games. I really do like it. There's a good chance that they can go on a 6-3 home record again this year. Obviously, depending on what they do with their internal divisional opponents at home as well as on the road. But it definitely is not a lost cause that this can be another good team and that they can get a good chunk of their wins within the comfort of their own house. On the road, it gets a little bit more tricky. You have New Orleans and Indy, which is obviously the easier teams out of the bunch. But besides that, Dallas, you do have some good games against Dallas, but they can also be a team that can drop a lot of points on you. You have to have a strong defense against them. You have Houston, that won't be a cakewalk easily, and then you have Tampa Bay and you have Cincinnati. And those are be where you need to improve on. Last year, the away schedule, you stuck at it. But this year, when you're on the away schedule again, you're going to have a long road ahead of you, but that does not mean that that has to be your Achilles heel in this case. And I think if that's not their Achilles heel, I think the Arizona Cardinals can definitely make a name for themselves and finally get over that hump. Once upon a time, the Cardinals were a bad team. Like they were constantly on the bottom, if not maybe third place, but they were not posting records of 8-9. They were more than likely a below average team for the most part. Of course, there were outlying years, but they were a below average team that really not many people paid attention to. It's hard to pay attention when you're also out there in the middle of nowhere in the desert. So I think this year they can have that opportunity to have that breakout season and maybe even get themselves into a wild card team. I don't see the Cardinals winning the division. Spoiler alert for the end of the video, but I don't see them winning the division. But I do see if they stack up enough good wins, if they hit all their home games the right way, like they could have the potential to do it, and if they run it down their opponent's throats like they can, then I do think that there is a possibility. But you have to use everybody on your roster and able to do it. They have very few ways that they can beat you. However, they can still beat you. And that is big secret to success for the Arizona Cardinals. Next, we have the San Francisco 49ers. And this one, I've said this in the last few videos when we've been going over people's opponents and everything like that. And every time I see San Fran pop up on somebody's schedule, I think to myself, that can either be a great win for that team against San Fran, or that can be a game where they just get smoked. If you asked me last year, it was a game that you can get a win off of. Basically, you were playing their second and third stringers with the amount of injuries that San Fran had last year. And if you go back 2 and 3 years ago, San Fran was a death sentence on your schedule. That was going to be a game. It didn't matter if they were coming to your house or you had to go and play them. San Fran was going to find a way to beat you more than likely because they were so good. Last year, again, name of the game for them were injuries. 6-11, they finished dead last in the division. The home was 4-5. Away was not. It was even worse. It was 2-6. It was the same as the Cardinals for the most part. They could not take away the ball like they used to with that stellar defense. They ended up having only 17 takeaways, and it ended up giving them a differential of -10. Obviously, not what you want. The one thing that did stay the same on that defense, though, was the pass defense. It was the top five, obviously something that you do want and is good that you were able to at least keep in with it. Defensive rush was 18th, get falling back down the ladder a little bit, but they gave up way too many points overall. 29th in points per game for that defense. They just could not stop anybody from getting into the end zone. And that was the part that eventually crippled this team and made them really realize for the league of like, okay, yeah, they're not going to be too good this year. Offense, Brock Purdy got it done. Passing was in the top five for them as well at fourth. Points per game were 14th, and the offensive rushing attack was at 12. And this was a good amount without Christian McCaffrey. Remember, he just like everybody else dealt with all those injuries that last year, and you thought to yourself like, "Oh, this offense is going to be horrible." Brock Purdy ain't going to be able to get done. Mr. Irrelevant is going to, lay an egg, and it's not going to be a pretty show for them. But honestly, all things considered, people ripped on Brock Purdy forever about, oh, he needs an entire weapon seam around him. Despite having the injuries and all that other stuff around him, when he was on the field, he did not perform that bad. Now, is this guy the greatest quarterback ever? Absolutely not. Let's be real about this. Brock Purdy definitely can be outshined by other quarterbacks on the field. However, to say that he needs an all pro team around him on offense and defense in order to win a game is a little bit outstretching there, because you need to know that Brock Purdy is not the type of person that needs that much help. Of course, he needs help. Every quarterback needs help. He needs more help than other quarterbacks. I'm willing to admit that perfectly fine. But the problem is that he gets no chance, and then he immediately gets dunked on the second that he ends up failing, even if it's at a minuscule level. And with that, now we go to their actual schedule. At home, besides the divisional opponents, they'll play Chicago, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Carolina, Atlanta. This is a very easy home schedule. And if we get a San Francisco team that's even remotely better than they were last year and are able to stay healthy, then it's very possible that they can win. I think they can win at least 6 of these games on the home. I really do think that. On the road, it gets a little bit harder. You got Tampa Bay, you got Houston, but to be honest, that's a little bit. And when I say it gets a little harder, I mean not too much. You play the Giants, you'll play Indy, you'll play Cleveland, and you'll play New Orleans. Obviously, you do have your divisional opponents. You don't know what Arizona and the Rams and Seattle have in store for you. Divisional opponents are always rough. It don't matter how good you are when you play a divisional opponent. There's always a chance that you can beat them or they can beat you. It don't matter on how well you're doing or how well they're doing. The name of the game for San Francisco is, are they going to stay healthy though? Injuries were a problem even when they were such a good team. Even a few years ago when they made their run to the Super Bowl, injuries were still an issue. The year before that, they practically had no quarterback to play against their other opponents. Like they got to the point where they couldn't even, in the championship game against the Eagles, they could not even pass anymore because they just had no quarterback remaining to play the position. And if it gets to a pattern like that, that is not good. And that's something that seriously needs to be worked on. I talked about this with the Detroit Lions in the video with the NFC North. Depth is a very important thing for the game of football. You have 11 people on offense on the field all the time. You have 11 people on defense on the field all the time, plus obviously your kickers and punters in the special teams division. But you have to have depth. You have to. Everybody needs multiple backups, and not only just need multiple backups like bodies. You need to show that you actually have competent bodies that can come in there, even if it's for a pinch. Hey, that guy's tired. Get him off right now so we can get some water, get a breather, and have the backup, who is still pretty good, run a play or two for them. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it's different in per position. You can do that with more so on the defensive standpoint. You see defenses sub out their guys a lot more often than offensive players, but you've got those men in the trenches on the offensive line. You have tight ends that double up as blockers when you run the ball, and also people that can roll out to throw to. Wide receivers, they're running around all day. You know they need oxygen after a while. If it's not crunch time, let them come off. And if they need a breather, you know you have a good backup to come in there and take care of business. That's the end for the San Francisco 49ers, is you need to have the backups. And if you have the backups, you have a chance, because the schedule this year is very easy. It really is. And if you are able to play your cards right and stay healthy, there's no reason why San Francisco can't make a run at this. But you have to literally bank and hope and pray that you do stay healthy. So that is really what's going to be the deciding factor. I know, of course, McCaffrey's always going to be a question mark with all the injury history he's had. He banged up almost every single year that he played for the Carolina Panthers, the team that drafted him. Last year was not good either with him. You obviously lose Debo Samuel to the Washington Commanders. That's obviously a loss, even though maybe he wasn't performing at the same high level that he was. It's still a loss because that's a lot of veteran status that can still get the job done pretty well that you don't have now in your wide receiver core. And it's going to make a difference. It will. However, again, you need to make sure that you stay healthy. Otherwise, you're going to have the same season that you had last year. Finally, we have the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a new look team. They pick up Sam Darnold and lose Geno Smith. And I don't know how I feel about that. You didn't do bad last year. You finished 10-7. You got second place. You were kind of getting close to the wild card spot, but you got pushed out at the end. The home schedule was not really going for you. You went 3-6. That's supposed to be the 12th man over there in Seattle. They got those fans yelling down on you if you're a road team playing in Seattle. Away, you were incredible. You were in 7-1. They got their wins by being on the road and being those road warriors. And imagine if they just performed a little bit better at home. They could have, and if they got even one more win at home, they could have ended up winning that division. It was close between them and the Rams, and they got pushed out at the very end. There was no wild card spots left for them. They didn't obviously have the same defensive, dominance. They were pretty good. They were 12th with points per game, 16th on the rush, and 11th with the pass defense. Again, all pretty much average to above average in regards to the league standard. Thing is, they didn't have as many takeaways, less than 20. They only had 18 takeaways, which was a little bit of a bummer considering how well the defense played as overall unit, and they just gave the ball away just a little too much. Turnover differential, excuse me, was -6. Can't have that, especially if you're going to try to make a run in the playoffs. Offense, a little bit more of a struggle. They could not run the ball to save their life. 28th. The points per game was better at 18th because it was the pass. The offensive passing attack was in the top 10, and that's exactly what you want. And this is led by Geno Smith. I don't like the trade now as we go back to the Sam Darnold trade that ends up going into Seattle, and he's going to be your new guy in Seattle. I don't like it. I really don't because Sam Darnold, we know what he's like. And I'm not trying to knock on the guy. Obviously, he's a pretty good quarterback. He did very well in Minnesota, and I would give him his props for it. I know I made fun of him last time for just not being able to get the job done and then obviously get burnt out in the end and everything like that. But he did well in Minnesota, and I think that really bought him some time and being able to do stuff. Obviously, I'm sure J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota learned a lot from watching Sam. And with that being said, though, I don't think that this is a good fit for Seattle to be able to take on somebody like Sam Darnold. Obviously, the offense that you have now is going to have to get used to another new quarterback. It's more change. It's more getting used to. It's more mechanics that need to go over based on who the person under center calling the plays is. You have to have that trust level as well. For this isn't like a defensive player saying, "I don't care about the quarterback." It's okay. You're not even on the same field with the guy. It's different if your offensive line is like, hey, I don't trust this guy too much. That's critical. He's the guy that you're supposed to be blocking for. You need to trust him. You need to have consistency and be able to have the same guy back there. And you didn't do too bad last year with it, especially with the passing attack. So having Darnold come in there, I'm not saying it's going to be a flop. I'm not saying that this is going to be a really, really bad scenario for Seattle. I think they will do relatively good, but I just am worried about what the new change is going to do, especially in one of the most critical spots ever, and that's the quarterback position. It's not like Seattle went, 5-12 last season. It's like, yeah, we need a change. Ain't working. You went 10-7. I mean, all things considered, you didn't do half bad. I know you lose Metcalf. Obviously, that's going to be a big critical hole in your wide receiving core. It's not looking good when it comes to that. However, you still need the opportunity to be able to do all this stuff for you. And, it just stinks because I feel like you're kind of hitting the reset button. Looking at their home schedule, you got Minnesota, of course, Minnesota. You have Houston, that'll be a little tough, and you have Tampa Bay, that's going to be a tough one as well. You can get some wins, hopefully, with New Orleans and in Indy. That brings you around what would be about the average of your home game last year. Obviously, instead of 9, you'll have 8 home games this year, being an NFC team. But I think, like I said, getting those home games are going to be critical. It was your Achilles heel last year. Let's see if you can actually shape up this year. For the road, it's a lot easier. You have Atlanta, which you can easily get a win with that. And not easily, but like it could potentially be a win in your win column. Carolina, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Washington, if you play your cards right, you have the potential to do very well on the road again. Obviously, you can't bank on doing well on the road. No team should bank on doing well on the road. If it happens, wonderful. But it shouldn't be something where you're latching on and being like, we have to do well on the road, otherwise we're done. That's not how we're supposed to be living, really, as a team in the NFL. But overall, I think the big change and adjustment with the most critical position on the field is going to be the deciding factor for the Seattle Seahawks. And it does weigh heavily a little bit on me on how I feel that this team is going to end when it comes to the division itself. So, with that being said, it's time to rank these divisions. In fourth place, because of the inconsistency, because I don't know, fourth place, I'm going to put the Seahawks. I am. I don't think the Seahawks are going to have enough to get it done. I do think that some of these teams are going to have a little bit of a better chance and have a better opportunity to. Obviously, on the road, you'll have teams like Washington and Pittsburgh. We don't know what Jacksonville will do. Atlanta could be a wild card. And if Seattle flunks out on the road, I think there's less opportunities for them to get some more home wins like they was last year for them. And I think their options are to be on the road. And I think having a new quarterback is going to hurt them more than help them this season. And Sam Darnold, although I hope he doesn't have a spike in the confidence level, I feel like it's going to be, struck a little bit, especially the way that season ended. Remember, last season he lost twice to the Los Angeles Rams, once during the regular season and then once in the playoffs to, you know, uh, end the season for the Vikings. You'll have to play the Rams twice again this year, now in your own division. Third, I'm going to go with the Cardinals. They're a dark horse. I like the Cardinals a lot, but I don't see them as being able to be that team to take the next step again this year. I think there's just too many variables. I think they could have the potential to be same record as they were even last year, honestly, at 8-9. But I just don't have enough to be able to say that they could potentially do it. I think at an 8-9 record, they could still wind up being third place. I don't know for sure what their record will be, but that's where I'm going to put them, at least standing wise, position wise. Second, I'm going to go with San Francisco. It's a big risk. I don't know what team you're going to get with San Francisco, but I'll go with them as getting second place. I think I have to factor in injuries, of course. If they do get injured, some of those easy wins could turn into difficult losses for them, but I'll go with them on that one. And for first place, I'll go with the Rams. I think the Rams will have enough to be able to continue to take positive strides. I know they play with a tough schedule, but I will go with the Rams to be able to repeat as a divisional winner. I just think that they'll be able to make better strides to be able to stay consistent with that team. I think they can definitely improve the offensive level a little bit. And I do think that they have the opportunity to definitely overcome some of the struggles that they had last year. So, first place, we have the Rams. Second place, we'll have the 49ers. Third place, the Cardinals. And then the Seahawks, I have in fourth. But that's just my personal opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking about when it comes to where you guys are stacking up the NFC West. If you like what you hear, feel free to subscribe. Definitely help me out a lot. Definitely like to hear you guys' feedback overall and what you feel. And as we get closer and closer to the start of the new NFL season. And of course, my name is Doc Klugman. Have a good night.